but I wanted to talk about two of our guests. I'm going to start with Dr. Jeffrey Rakowski, who's here with us. We actually went to high school together, so it's really nice to see him in this setting. It's like a mini reunion, and he has a lot of good information to drop on us. Dr. Jeffrey Rakowski is an adult psychiatrist who specializes in the treatment of mood and anxiety disorders. He is an associate professor at Emory University, where he directs medical student education in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences. We're so fortunate to be joined by Dr. Jeff Rakowski. How are you doing?
Good. Happy to be here.
Thank you for being here. Sonia, do you want to tell us about our next guest?
And then, yes, I have the privilege of introducing Miss Omalola or Lola Odubaga. I had the privilege of working with her while she was still an emergency room nurse. And while she was working as an emergency room nurse, her experiences illuminated the disconnect between medical and psychiatric care, especially how the mind and body connection are ignored. So this kind of encouraged her to pursue her Master's of Science in Nursing from Georgia State University, and she obtained her psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner title. And in doing so, she wanted to develop a practice that integrated medical and mental health for the most effective treatments. So now she's a Georgia board certified psychiatric nurse practitioner. And she currently takes care of people in her private practice, Mindset Healthcare, where clients can receive medication management if warranted and therapy. She possesses the natural ability to build rapport with her clients and their families, and that leads to positive outcomes related to their treatment. Her belief in the mind, body, and spirit connection guides her, educating them and allowing them to view themselves as whole, not parts, which lead to a path towards their healing. So thank you, Ms. Lola, for being here and participating.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks, Lola, for being here. I want to start with you, Dr. Rakowski. You heard, I believe, a former colleague of yours, Dr. Metzger, talking about what she believes are the challenges in 2020. My specific question to you is the same. I want to know what you think is the most difficult thing as a mental health expert and psychiatrist, and what you're seeing more of in this year, if anything.
Yeah, well, I would agree with Dr. Metzger that one of the biggest challenges of this year is the number of crises that we're facing. Not just one, but several. Right? We've got the pandemic. We've got the economic problems that are coming as a result of the shutdown itself, hyperpolarization like we've never seen in our society, climate change issues, and they're all hitting us at the same time. And so, I think people are feeling a lot of despair, uncertainty, fear, and people are feeling more divided at the same time. So they have less people that they can connect with. A part of that has to do with social media. The other part has to do with, I think, all the isolation that's been brought on by the shutdown, the quarantining as part of the pandemic.
Okay, I see. Yeah, it can feel very isolating, obviously, with the shutdown and so forth. Lola, I have the same question for you. What do you think is going on?
With mental health in
2020, what makes it different? Why is this different? You both work in, practices that are outpatient. Jeff, I know you also see people inpatient, but I'm really trying to get at what is different. What are you seeing differently? So the same question I posed to Jeff, I kind of want to know from you. I see you're at your clinic, and I want to know what's going on in 2020 from your perspective.
So what I'm seeing is an increase of alcohol use, increase of substance abuse use, of course, depression and anxiety, and just the worrying and not knowing what is going to happen tomorrow. Because media plays such a large role in a lot of our decision making. And so for me, I try to tell my clients to stay away from media, especially if it's not a reliable source. And they say, what's the news? It's the news. And I'm like, just because it's the news doesn't necessarily mean that it's real. And, don't focus so much on tomorrow, because fear is horrible and it will encapsulate you and prevent you from doing anything. And by me working outfield, I work for core agencies as well. And I have a lot of schizophrenic patients, and they already have that paranoia. So this is making it worse.
Mm-hmm.
And So just being able to express to them like, hey, I understand, and I'm not negating the fact that coronavirus is not real. We all know that it's real, but take your necessary precautions because you still have to live. You still have to go to the store, get groceries. You still got to go get your medicine, you know? So you still have to, you have to eat. So you have to go to the grocery store. You have to do whatever it is to maintain your activities of daily living. So if you run out of tissue paper, you know, you're going to have to compromise. We're going to have to wash more and get a wash rag. Like, try to find an alternative route and don't focus so much on the problem, but find a solution.
Well, let me ask you a question. You kind of brought it up from the standpoint, like there's a lot of people that already had mental illness or mental health issues. So you find that it's making those issues worse and harder to treat?
Definitely. I had a client right before, she was a young adult. She came in, she was experiencing depression from school, and she had some anxiety. And I started her on medication, and she was doing well. She started coming to me in November. She was doing well. When the pandemic hit and school stopped, it was like, the medicine's not working anymore. I feel bad. There's no prom. I can't graduate. So all those, you know, anxiety of, if I can't do all of this, if I can't graduate, then I can't go to college. I can't do this. So she's worrying about the future. It's not even here yet. So now she's, you know, the mind believes what you tell it. So if you tell the mind my medicine's not working, it's not going to work. And no matter what was going on, she had this relief until the pandemic hit. And then things started going downhill. So I increased her medication. We increased her therapy. She's doing better now, but she was scared. I mean,
I can imagine.
Everybody was. I mean,
everybody
the media showing all these body bags, everybody dying. You're like, oh my God, am I going to die tomorrow? You know, so.
I hear you. Jeff, I have a question for you.
Sure.
I want to know if you feel that there are certain subsets of our population that are particularly more vulnerable during this time period.
Yeah, well, certainly the elderly that are in nursing homes, who haven't been able to connect with their families for safety purposes. But, you know, a lot of folks in that age group are already dealing with isolation. And so then when we closed down all the nursing homes to, you know, we put them on isolation, that just made it so much harder. And the problem with isolation is that it's deadly. We know that loneliness is associated with increased risk of mortality and certainly makes depression worse. So they're a particular group that I'm very much worried about.
Yeah. I mean, what can people do for loneliness, right? I mean, you mentioned that just by nature of what's going on, even let's take just from a COVID standpoint, the shutdowns, and even outside from the shutdowns, as things are being lifted, it's still not the same life that we knew. You still can't just go out to a restaurant in most cases and easily engage with your friends as you did. So the elderly who are in nursing homes, or even younger people who are at home by themselves with not very many places to go, what do you suggest that they do to help with that isolation?
Yeah, they have to be intentional about finding alternatives. You know, they have to see this as a time to try to rebuild a new normal in the meantime. You know, you hear people talking about the new normal. Well, in order to stay well, you know, these things have to be prioritized, and you have to figure out a way to try to have that social contact in a safe way. So, you know, some people are setting up weekly family Zoom meetings, or, you know, finding a safe friend, a friend who can also commit to being safe during the week, and then hanging out, you know, once a week, and that way they can still be in person and have that connection. Of course, both wearing masks and maintaining distance. But the key is to be intentional, to be safe, and to make sure that it's part of your weekly routine.
Let me ask a question also from the standpoint of, you know, definitely there already prior to this, there was a stigma around mental health, getting help. Do you feel like that with all of the things that are going, is that making people more engaged in coming to or trying to pursue help? Or do you feel like it's still an issue in order for people to come, be open and getting help and seeking help?
Is that for me or for?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, stigma is certainly an issue. It's gotten better over the years. There's studies that have looked at reductions in stigma. There tends to be more stigma towards certain aspects of mental illness than others. So like there's a lot more stigma towards having bipolar disorder or schizophrenia than there would be towards having depression or anxiety. But there are a lot of people that might not meet criteria for a psychiatric illness that could still benefit from having a therapist to speak with, because maybe they are having just a hard time coping. And I think with all of these commercials for therapists by app, or online therapists, I think that's helping. I can't speak to the quality of those programs, but just the fact that they're commercials, and you have celebrities that are talking about it and saying, "Oh, well, therapy saved my life." I think that helps, and the fact that so many of us are we're all in this together. We're all experiencing a lot of these same things. I think that too might help with stigma reduction.
How about, I want to ask that question to you too, Lola, just because I know that there are different, I know in our community, and that is the Black community, there's stigma too. And it's also not a tradition of seeking mental health care. So I'm curious to know if you're seeing problems with getting clientele that are in the Black community.
Always. It's the stigma, but as a mental health provider, it is my job to erase that stigma. And I tell everyone, I relate. My analogy is mental health and physical health. We all have physical health and we all have mental health. We have parameters that dictate whether our physical health, when you go take your questionnaire, is it good, poor, or fair? The same thing with your mental health, is it good, poor, or fair? And when the parameters that we use for our physical health is, we'll check our blood sugar, we'll check our blood pressure, and based on those parameters, we'll say, oh, okay, so now you no longer have, because your blood pressure is high, or they checked your hemoglobin A1C, now you no longer have physical health, you have physical disorder. You now have been diagnosed with diabetes, or you have been diagnosed with high blood pressure. The same thing when it comes to mental health. Like, every day is not going to be a good day, and some days are going to be bad. But so that's still your mental health. But when it turns into weeks and days and months and years, that's when it becomes a disorder. Right. So we all have, and that's the best way that I try to give that analogy. And people like, oh, well, when you put it that way, okay. So it's just trying my best to do my part to erase the stigma that is attached, and let everyone know, hey, it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
To reach the help that you need and talk about it. So if we can erase the stigma, then we can have more people who are willing to speak, and we can prevent suicide. We can prevent increased anger, right? Because you're not want to talk to someone, so you take that rage and then you go shoot somebody. So there's a lot of things that we can prevent if we erase that stigma.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask a question that popped up on the stage, which I think is an important one. I'll start with you, Jeff. Because you work in academics, so I just assume that you're privy to all the facts and stats and research. I want to know if suicides are increasing. One of our guests wants to know, and I want to know, in general, for actually two reasons. One, because it's an important question, and two, because often you hear the narrative that, well, we shouldn't be too isolated with the coronavirus. We don't have to follow these protocols, because even though the virus kills, suicide and depression and substance abuse kills more. And so they're pitting these two ideas against each other and trying to decide which is more dangerous. So my first question is, are suicides on the rise? And my second is, what are your thoughts about the whole comparing the coronavirus and death from that to death and problems from mental health?
Yeah. So in order to answer the question about suicides, we usually look to CDC data, and the last CDC report on suicides reported on data from 2018, which showed that rates have increased. But if we just talk about looking at suicidal ideation, there have been reports that show, I think the graphic that you showed before from the CDC included a question where they asked respondents in a survey in the last 30 days, have you had an increase in suicide or thoughts about death? And there was an increase greater than what had been seen in the months before, when they had run that, or when they had performed that survey. And what was interesting was the people who, and the groups that were most likely to have those increases in suicidal thinking. And it was people of color, people that were caring for adults but unpaid, so like people caring for their own parents, and also people of Hispanic background as well. So yeah, so the answer is yes, there's been an increase, certainly an increase in suicidal thoughts. Oh, and actually, let me also say in the military, there has been documented an increase in suicides. Now, their population is a lot smaller than the population of the whole country, so it's easier to be able to come up with those numbers more readily.
Great. I mean, we figured that was the case. But what about the question that we should not be isolating or not be quarantining because of this?
Yeah,
so we can reconcile these two things?
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be all or none, right? Like people can quarantine, they can wear masks, and yet we can find ways to help people still have human contact. Or, we can, at the government level, we can have policies in place that put money in people's pockets so that they're not, they don't have the added burden of becoming bankrupt and not being able to pay their bills. There are all sorts of things that we can do to minimize the I guess the psychological burden that comes with quarantining.
Fair enough. Speaking about coronavirus and mask wearing and quarantining, we just want to remind everyone that even though we are all thoroughly tired of coronavirus is not tired of us. Please remember to wear your masks. Please remember to socially distance. We can do better in this fight against the virus. Take care of yourselves and watch this brief interlude from friend of WDT, Dr. Anwar Osborne, just reminding us of how we can wear our masks.
Hi, I'm Dr. Anwar Osborne. There's been some confusion lately about wearing masks, and I want to give you the facts. Masks are like your drawers. Follow drawers rules. Rule number 1, don't let anything hang out. Nothing should be peeking out of your drawers ever. None of this. None of this. You can't bird box the Rona. Rule number 2, don't adjust in public. Would you really dig deep to pick out a wedgie? No. Don't adjust them in public with your hands. Your hands carry germs. Wash those nasty things before you put your mask on and before you take it off. Rule number 3, keep them off the table. When you go to a restaurant, would you just casually toss your dirty drawers on the table? I don't need your Fruit of the Looms next to my guacamole. No bueno. Rule number 4, wash them or be nasty. If your mask has more stains on it than the Tupperware you use to store your tomato sauce, you got problems. If it has holes in it, trash it. Wash your mask. Rule number 5, don't swap them. Don't share them with your friends. Hey bro, can I borrow your boxes real quick to just run in that store over there? I mean, for real, remember the rules. Don't let anything hang out. Don't adjust anything in public. Keep them off the table, wash them or be nasty. And don't swap them. Most importantly, wear them. Now you know, don't forget it.
I have another question, but Sonia, you look like you had a question that you wanted to ask, so I'm gonna let you get in there.
No, I was just going to ask Lola because she had made mention from the standpoint of media and the information that people come in and it could potentially be harmful, but also from the standpoint of even conspiracy theories. And especially it seems like now within the last, 2020 and the last few years, even with our administration, that kind of thing, does that pose problems you see like in the community that you work with and trying to help them and seeking mental health services?
Oh, definitely the media plays a role and higher services play a role as well. And you're going to have conspiracy theories. It is what it is. But, if you come to me or if you seek help, then you notice there's a problem. So for me, when parents or family members and things kind of force the help on them, it never works because they're not interested. They don't see a problem within themselves.
Right.
So that's the largest barrier that I have when it comes to seeking help or getting the help that you need. Because if you don't believe in it, you're not going to do. You're not going to take the medication. You're not going to put in the work. You're not going to do it. So if you're a conspiracist, you don't believe in it. So you're not going to listen to me. You're going to be like, oh, you're full of junk, or you work for somebody, or whatever. So it's all in a belief, what you believe in. So until you recognize there's a problem, or you hit rock bottom and say, you know what, I can't do this anymore, I need some help. It doesn't matter what you hear or what you see, you're not going to get the help you need.
Absolutely. Georgia, I just want to remind you all that today is the first day of early voting for the senatorial elections. December 14th, it's today. Make a plan to vote. Get out there and vote. We do have all the way until January, but it's best to start early. Remember, we had an historic turnouts for voting, and we can do it again for our more local elections. Get out there and vote for those senators. Back to our show. Jeff, Dr. Rakowski, how do our viewers know, for either themselves or for a loved one, when it's time to get help? What are some signs that it's not just, oh, I'm just a little bit worried, everybody's worried, or I'm just a little bit sad, everyone's sad? When do we know when it's time to seek help for ourselves or solicit help for our loved ones?
Yeah, well, when we see these kinds of emotions or worries interfering with our productivity at work or at home, when it's starting to affect our sleep or our appetite, certainly if we're having thoughts about not wanting to be alive anymore, or wondering about if life is even worth living, these are all indicators that it's best to get professional help at that point. And that maybe with the help of therapy or with medicines, that a lot of those symptoms might be able to be addressed.
Excellent. And what I love is that there are so many different avenues to seek mental help. I mean, it's not one thing. What I've learned just in speaking to some of our experts and even to some of my colleagues who are in the mental health profession, it's not about taking meds only, because there's some people who are like, I don't want them to put me on all these meds. It's not about sitting on somebody's couch and doing therapy. It's a integrated approach, and there are different things. And what I've learned, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that certain things that might be right for one patient are not right for another. But the main thing, it seems like, is access to care. If you think you need it or somebody needs it, seeking it, overcoming stigmas. And so I really appreciate the insight that both of you have given us about that, about when we should start looking for care, about the different modalities of care. Lola, you're coming as a nurse practitioner who's certified in psychiatry. And Jeff, you're a psychiatrist with your practice working in academics. I just feel like seeing different places that people can go and different players within the mental health care system is really important. And on that note, I wanted to thank you all for sharing with us your thoughts about what's hurting people in 2020 and how they can get better in 2020. Stick around, because we want to get some final thoughts for you in a bit, but we're going to bring on our next guest. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks.
Well, everyone, that completes another episode of When Docs Talks, Are We Okay series, examining the challenges to mental health in 2020. We hope that you enjoyed it, and we hope that you recognize that you're not alone. Please be sure to check us out at our YouTube channel, When Docs Talk. Subscribe to us and get notifications for our upcoming shows. And if you've missed any of our series or any of our past episodes, you could also catch them there.